Awesome. Okay, I'm going to hand it off to Josie, who is going to tell us a little bit about our guest speaker, and then we'll go right ahead.
Hey, can everybody hear me fine? Yes, awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. My name is Josie. I'm a UTEP Ignite member, and today we have the honor of interviewing Joanne Bernal. So Ms. Bernal, she was born and raised here in El Paso and has been practicing attorney for over 30 years. On January 1st, 2011, she became the first woman elected county attorney in El Paso's history. Ms. Bernal's duties include the representation of cases involving abuse and neglect of the children and the elderly. Ms. Bernal has received numerous awards for her work in the community and her professional achievements. Included in those awards are 2009 Outstanding Lawyer of the Year by the Mexican American Bar Association, 2012 La Mujer Obrera Award, 2015 Trailblazer Award for the Women's Bar Association. 2015, she received the McDonald's Hispanos Triunfadores Award. In 2017, she received the Albert Armendariz Jr. Lifetime Achievement Award from the Mexican American Bar Association. And in October, she received the 2017 Women of Distinction Award by the Texas Association of Mexican American Chambers of Commerce. So Ms. Bernal also serves on the board of the Center Against Sexual and Family Violence. Ms. Bernal is married to Eddie Castillo, and she has two daughters, Cassandra and Alexis. So that's really neat. Thank you for joining us tonight, Ms. Bernal.
Thank you for having me. Can I say before you start asking me questions that I recognize a whole bunch of names from my office, and I think that's so sweet that you all came. But I got to tell you that there are some fabulous lawyers and staff members on this call. And so if there's a question I can't answer, I would really encourage them to give their views, and especially some women that are real inspiration. And so I would love to hear from them. But I also recognize two women, not from my office, that I am a super fan of. And one is Dr. Moya. I saw her before. I don't know if she remembers me, but I have followed her career for a long time. Oh, there she is. I followed her career for a long time, and she is such an inspiration, and I admire her quite a lot. And I also see Judy Ackerman, who's a I don't know, warrior in all things important in El Paso, and she's active in so many organizations and boundless energy. And every time I see her, I feel like I should be doing more. And so nice to see you, Judy and Dr. Moya. And for those of you that I don't know, nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. It's so great to see all y'all's faces on here. I'm so excited to get to know everybody a little bit more. And I love what you said. We definitely want this to be a conversation. Our whole goal is to just create an atmosphere of empowerment for men and women, especially women here in El Paso. So we're so excited to have you all with us. And especially Ms. Bernal, thank you so much for your time. Josie, do you want to ask the first question?
Of course. So since we kind of already started talking about this, we just want to know a little bit more about yourself. Where are you from? Where did you go to high school? Anything that you want to add on to your bio?
Sure. Well, I'm a El Pasoan, born and raised, and I graduated from Loretto in 1979, yes, in the 70s. And I immediately moved to Austin, and I went to UT Austin undergrad, and I stayed there, went to UT Austin Law School. And after I graduated and passed the bar, I practiced in Austin at the Texas Attorney General's office for about 7 years. And like a lot of El Pasoans, I eventually made my way back home. In my case, my parents were living here and my father was really sick. And so I took a leave of absence for 1 year to come to El Paso because my father, we thought at the time, didn't have much time left. And so I took a 1 year sabbatical and Then he ended up living for another 8 years, kind of tricked me to come home. And by the time I came home, and then I fell in love all over again with El Paso. Like for a lot of people, when you're born and raised here, you don't appreciate El Paso until you leave. And then you remember all of the really great things that as a teenager you didn't appreciate. So when I came back, I was already in my 30s, and I fell in love and got married and inherited two wonderful children. One of them is a law student in Pennsylvania, and the other one works for a hotel in Dallas. And so the younger one is doing the virtual law school, mostly virtual, but some in person. So I know how difficult it is during the pandemic to try to stay active in organizations. And so I think it's really great that you all are continuing with this important part of your education, because it's not just the school, it's the connections that you make, the people that you meet, and the people that will support you on your journey. So thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So what specifically led you to the area of public service?
I had always been interested in working in the public sector. And frankly, I originally thought I would go into maybe a social work field. And I have a brother, an older brother, who was a lawyer when I first started college. And I was inspired by a lot of the work that he did. He worked for and represented migrant farm workers all over the country. And he traveled, and he had such rewarding stories. And I think I eventually was convinced that I could do more good with a law degree than I could as a social worker. And so, inspired by him getting started, I decided to go to law school, and kind of ended up making my way back to El Paso.
That's awesome. So was there a specific moment where you kind of just realized the potential, the leadership in you, where you were like, this is it, it's time for me to go into this position?
Yeah, no, not at all. I never had an interest in being a public official, never had an interest in running for office. And if you had asked me 20 years ago, I would have laughed at the idea that I would run for office. I was really fortunate to work for Jose Rodriguez. When I came back to El Paso, he hired me. He is our soon retiring senator, who has been a great friend and a great mentor to me. And when he decided kind of abruptly to retire as county attorney and run for Senate, um, I decided because I feel like the county attorney's office can make such a difference in people's lives, that I wasn't willing to just step back and let somebody else take over. And so with a lot of his urging, I decided to run, and frankly, with a lot of the support from the lawyers that were in the office and the staff. There's a lot of authority with the county attorney's office, but there's a whole lot of responsibility. And when you're in the field, I think it becomes apparent to you that you can change lives and you can make lives better. And a lot of the lawyers that are on right now are lawyers that make such a difference in people's lives. And so it was sort of a natural combination for me to run for office. I was terrified when I first did. I'm glad that I did, but it is a terrifying prospect when you first run for office, because you so put yourself out there. And I have always been someone that I consider to be a very private person. And running for office is just the least private thing that you can do. And so you really put yourself out there, your integrity, your family. It is a big commitment. But I'm so glad that I did, because every day in the work that I see with the office, I see us making a difference. And I tell people, I see Amy Monsiváis on, and I will ask her, or Laura Christopherson, how are you going to save the world today? Are you like saving lives? Are you fixing the world? And they laugh, but I know that they go and try to do it. And so when you have a group of people that are so dedicated and committed to changing the world, then, you know, there's nothing that you can't accomplish.
Wow, that's so amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Um, was there ever a woman, especially towards the beginning of your career, that mentored you or that you looked up to at all?
You know, so many women. I have been blessed with with being surrounded by a group of women that have been very supportive of my career, that encouraged me and pushed me. And don't want to name names because some of them are on the screen and I'll forget somebody. But absolutely, I think you can't underestimate the value and the power of having women behind you to help you accomplish things. I mean, it is really powerful. And I've got to say that Veronica Escobar has also been a great friend and a great mentor. And when Jose Rodriguez decided to retire or resign to run for the Senate, she was one of the first ones that called me and said, "You have to run. You know, you have to do it." And we had a long conversation about all the reasons why I didn't want to do it. And I think in the end, you know, Veronica convinced me, and she's very, she's very convincing. But she convinced me that sometimes running for office isn't really about you, right? It's about the community and it's about what you can do, and you really have to put aside sort of your own apprehensions or your own insecurities, and you just have to try. And so she's been a great influence. She was also a client because as county attorney, we represent county government. And so she was the former county judge before she was congresswoman. So I got to know her as a client, but also as a friend. And, you know, I laugh, I tell her that she's been a mentor because she's considerably younger than me. But sometimes you can have people that are younger than you that can be a great influence and inspiration too. So I always thank Veronica for what she does in the community.
Right. I think a lot of us look up to Veronica, so that's amazing. So now that we kind of touched up on that topic, did you struggle with any self-confidence towards the beginning of your career? And if so, how did you overcome that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think anyone in public office that tells you that they don't have insecurities, I think is being less than forthright. There's all sorts of insecurities always, I think, in running for office. And I know that I've had a female friend describe to me this idea of the imposter syndrome. You know, this idea that someone is going to discover that you're not actually that smart or you're not that competent. And when you run for office, I mean, you are so putting yourself out there. You're telling people to vote for you. You're telling people why you should be leading this office, why they should put their faith and trust in you. And you struggle with, you know, knowing that that feeling of that imposter syndrome. And I think if, you know, I love the idea of this organization and talking about, you know, women that run for office because I have always considered myself, and I still consider myself, to be a very ordinary person. You know, I wasn't born like super wealthy or super poor. I was born in like just into a real middle class family that was, you know, loving parents and loving siblings, and never had any real trauma in my life, but never felt like I was so extraordinary. And I think that a lot of times people feel that you've got to be extraordinary to run for office. And but I think and I believe that if you've got the commitment and the willingness to work harder than anybody else in the room, that ordinary people really can do extraordinary things. And it isn't the things that I do that are extraordinary. It is the things that the office does and that the lawyers that are on this chat do. I mean, that's extraordinary things that you can get done, but you have to really believe that you can do it. And feeling very ordinary, absolutely. I mean, I was not somebody who I thought like deserved to be county attorney. And there is a real sense of needing to convince yourself that you are as smart as the person you're running against. I had a really difficult campaign when I ran and so many insecurities. My opponent was very aggressive, and she was so much taller than me. And every time we debated and we would go to debates, she just towered over me. And there is an insecurity, a physical insecurity about being so much shorter than people. I mean, I'm not like a midget, but I'm not super tall. And my opponent was very, very tall. And so there's physical insecurities. And then there's the insecurity of dealing with people that are so aggressive, like a lot of women in our culture. I was raised to be very respectful to people and very respectful in public. And politics can be a really tough, it can be a very tough arena, and you have to really be able to stand up for yourself and advocate for yourself. And I think of everything on talking about insecurities and running for office, one of the hardest things kind of culturally is that we are not taught as little girls to brag about yourself, right? It's unnatural to stand in front of a room and say, I'm the smartest lawyer in this room, or I'm the best anything. And when you run for office, you have to advocate for yourself in a way that's really kind of unnatural. People that know me will probably say that I've gotten good at it, which is maybe not a good thing to advocate, but you can't be limited by I think a natural sense of either like modesty or propriety, or the idea that it's somehow unseemly to tell other people I'm the best, or I'm the smartest, or I'm the most competent, because it doesn't come naturally. And in my experience, it especially doesn't come naturally to women. So it's something that I think as women that we struggle with our whole lives. And it's never easy to be that person that stands in front of the room and says, I am the best. And I think it's something that we all need to work to move beyond, because so many of you are the best at what you do. And but if you don't advocate for yourself, you'll find sometimes that nobody's advocating for you. And I will say that that men, in my experience, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, that men are much better at advocating for themselves in groups of people, that they are much better at saying, I'm the best, I'm the smartest, I'm the most competent. And so I think it's a lesson that we can learn, but something that really you work at your whole life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. And that kind of seamlessly goes into our next, I guess, topic or question, talking about just biases that you face specifically as a woman of color as well. And just, if you don't mind going a little bit further into detail of how mentally do you overcome that, right? Because I mean, sometimes it has to be an internal thing, right? So how do you have a process or?
I think surrounding yourself with people that you trust and that you love or you respect and support is really helpful for giving you that encouragement and that confianza to be able to deal with situations. When I first started practicing law, I was working in Austin, but I was assigned to East Texas. And I was very often the only female lawyer. I mean, this was back in the early 80s. I was very often the only female lawyer, and I did litigation. And I was almost always the only Hispanic in the room. And it was culturally very different for me. And it was the first time I think that I had experienced somebody looking at me and basing their expectations on me as a lawyer based on what I looked like. And so obviously it's very different practicing in El Paso. In my office, there's more female lawyers than there are male lawyers. And there are far more Hispanics, obviously, in El Paso. But when I first started practicing law, I think that that was one of my big hurdles. I wasn't used to being judged in my abilities based on how brown I was, or how female I was, or how short I was. I can remember being in federal court when I was a very young lawyer, and if any of you have been in federal court, a lot of the old federal courtrooms have a very, very high bench, and the federal judge sits above everybody else. The very first jury trial I did, I had to stand back from the bench because I was too short to see the judge when he called us up for a conference. And so you notice those limitations. I think you work to overcome them, and I think you also work to you use them there to your advantage. I know that many times when I started practicing law, my opponents underestimated me because of how I looked, and I think that that can be a good thing. And it's something as a lawyer that you try to figure out how you're going to use it to your advantage.
Yeah. I love that. I think actually in all the women who ran, I don't know if anybody's answered that question in that way of kind of switching it and using it for your benefit. So it's a very unique perspective. And I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes that's what we have to do. So can I ask your advice about bipartisan, nonpartisan, working across the aisle with people who you may not necessarily agree with? Maybe not even in the position that you're serving in right now, but just throughout your life, what's some advice that you can give us about working with people who we may not agree with?
Yeah, it happens so frequently on public policy issues. I still believe that most people are good people, and most people want the same things at a basic kind of core level. We all want to live in safety. We want our children to be successful. We want our parents to be healthy. We want to live in a community where we feel accepted and appreciated. And we want to work in a job where you're appreciated for your work. So I think that at the core level, we've seen the division in politics recently, right, on a partisan level. I think that we have to remember that at core level, most people are good people, and we mostly want the same thing. So if you start the conversation with identifying common bases of values, then it's easier to get to a place where we all want to be. And I will use, for example, right now there's a lot of controversy in the city and in the state about like how we're dealing with the pandemic, right? And should there be a shutdown order? Should there not be a shutdown order? What's the best way to do it? Should you wear a mask? Should you not wear a mask? Well, I think that if we go back to our basic values, nobody wants to be sick, right? Nobody wants businesses to fail. Nobody wants to work from home forever. We've got to kind of revert back to where we're all on the same page before we can find solutions going forward. So that would be my advice. That sometimes we need to just step back and try to think, where are we on the same page? Where do we believe the same things? And at what point are our values the same? And then try to, sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes we're so divergent that I think there's not middle ground. But for most times, I think if you give the other person the benefit of the doubt that they're coming from a place of similar values, that it's easier to get to a place of compromise.
Right,
It's not
I
always
agree.
possible.
I agree. I think coming to a middle ground is really important, especially, with all the division we are seeing going on. So that's a really great advice. I appreciate that. And then something I'm really interested in is political involvement, especially here in El Paso. It's significantly low. So is there any advice or suggestions on how you think the youth should be, well, specifically women, how they should be engaged in the civic process and, just be prepared to run for office?
That's a great question. My experience has been um, that the best way to get involved in the political system is to be a volunteer. I mean, one, that's how you meet people. I mean, people like Miss Ackerman could tell you, helping other people gives you the gives you inroads to understanding other people's political values. There's a lot of camps, different political camps in El Paso, but you have to find who I think whose beliefs you're most aligned with, or whose policies you're most aligned with, Volunteering is a great way. I also think joining political organizations. As an elected official, there's so much apathy in the community. When you run for office, you are always looking for organizations to talk to, and there's so many. There's a lot of groups that you can go and talk to, like, there's East Side Democrats, West Side Democrats, the Republican Alliance. There's those groups, but very often it's the exact same people at all the meetings. And now what you're finding, and I know there's a group, there's what are they, the Sunrise, and some other groups that have started. When you start a group, if you can get a group of 20 voters in a room, you can command the respect of having people that are running for office come to your organization to talk to you, because elected officials are always looking for groups of people that are engaged and who are registered voters to listen to them talk about policy. And frankly, it's hard to get people to be engaged. It's hard to get people to listen. And so as young people, the more organizationally organized you are, I think the more you command the respect of people who are in office, and it's easier to engage them and have them listen to you and listen to what you're interested in. And I think elected officials, like your organization, elected officials notice who's organized, who can turn out the vote, who's willing to listen to them. So I would encourage you to join those organizations, start your own organization, or become an active member in ones that are already in existence.
Yep, great advice. Thank you. Can you share with us a rewarding story from your time in public service?
That is the hardest question, because I don't know. There are so many moments. I took office in 2009 when I was first appointed. There have been so many moments that have stuck out as really powerful to me, and reaffirmed and reinforced why I wanted to run for office. But there is a particular lady that kind of stands out. So one of the units in my office is the domestic violence unit. And for several years, the unit organized a bike race where we would raise money, and it was for scholarships for women who had been victims of domestic violence. They would apply for the scholarships so that they could use the money, having survived domestic violence, to use the money to find a way to thrive, right? It was that moving beyond just surviving. Our office gets protective orders for women that are victims of domestic violence. And so we set up this scholarship program. And in the 6 or 7 years that it was in effect, I think we gave away about $15,000 in scholarships. So it wasn't huge sums of money, but it was enough money that made a difference for people. And so when we awarded scholarships, we had a ceremony, and the recipients would come and we'd give them a flower, and we would honor them and give them their scholarship. And at one of the very first scholarship ceremonies, there was a woman there, and she was a little bit older than me. She was probably in her mid 60s. And she told the story that she had lived in an unincorporated area of El Paso County, and she had lived with her husband, who had been physically abusing her all of their marriage. And so she got the scholarship, and I think it was $1,500, and it was to help her enroll. I don't know if it was at EPCC, or she had some program in mind that she was going to enroll in. But the media was all there, and the media wanted to interview people. And of course, we tell them, look, if you don't want to be interviewed, this is a very private matter. You don't have to talk to anybody. But if you'd like to be interviewed, the media's here, they'd like to interview you. And so this lady gave an interview in Spanish, and she told us, she talked about, breaking free of domestic violence, and that she had lived this really awful life and she was moving forward. And she told me afterwards, or she told one of my staff afterwards, that it was such a joy to her, because she knew that her husband, watched, I think it was Telemundo every single night in his chair, and that night she was going to watch, he was going to be watching her interview on the news talk about starting her new life. And she was just thrilled with the fact that she was going to be speaking to her abuser through the news to tell him that she had won a scholarship and that she was moving on and she was going to thrive. And I always remembered, I've always remembered that woman, and I don't know whatever happened to her. I hope she ended up thriving. But it was so moving to me because she was so joyful in that idea of that he was going to sit there and he was going to watch her. And she was not just thriving, she was on TV and she was telling him, this is where I'm at and I've moved on. And so it has always stuck with me. I know some of the lawyers from our domestic violence, I see Rafaela's face there or on the screen. They do such important work, and it goes back to, you know, every story is important. Every life that we can help save, every family that is, you know, maybe we can get a protective order so those children don't grow up in a family of violence. Every single one of those is an important story, and every single one of them makes a difference in the lives of those families. But that lady in particular is somebody that has always stuck with me. And I think of her from time to time, and I hope she's doing well.
Wow, that's such an amazing story. Thank you for making an impact on a lady's life. I'm pretty sure she's really appreciative of it. So this next question's probably my favorite. If you could tell your 20-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
I would give myself so much advice when I was 26. So 26 is for lawyers is when you're graduating from law school. And so I don't even know where I'd start with advice, but I think there's so much. I think I would tell myself to not be scared, you know, to not be scared that that there's other people in the courtroom that are smarter than you, or that that somebody's going to do a better job, to maybe have a little more confidence, and to not be afraid, to try things that you want to do.
That's awesome. Really great advice. I'm going to take that one for myself. Okay, so we are going to transition to Q&A with participants, all you guys on this call. So Sarah, our member Sarah, is going to be helping out with that. Sarah's been collecting the questions that are being asked in the chat. So there's a few different ways that we can do this. If you asked a question when you registered, Sarah also has a list of those. So Sarah, if you want to start out with one of those first, and then if you asked a question in the chat, you have the option of either unmuting yourself and asking yourself, or Sarah can read it for you if you're more comfortable with that. She will just ask what you want to do before she reads the question. So thank you, Sarah.
Okay, hi everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, so one question we have is, how will you, Ms. Bernal, help eliminate gerrymandering at the county and civil levels?
I bet that's a Miss Ackerman question. Well, what we have tried to do is, you know, most recently when I think it was the House Committee on Redistricting came to El Paso, I did sign up to testify. I am a very firm believer that redistricting should not be a political decision, and it shouldn't matter who is controlling at any level of government for redistricting to be accomplished. So I am a proponent of having the redistricting decisions decided by a nonpartisan committee of citizens. So I have worked with and originally presented to one of our county commissioners the idea that we don't have the legal authority to actually, we do our own level of redistricting at the local level. So each of you has a county commissioner, you have a justice of the peace, you have a constable that you live within their district. And so the county commissioners draw those lines. So last year, we presented and discussed with Commissioner Stout the idea that although the county commissioners cannot delegate that authority to citizens, they could create a citizens committee that could review various maps and provide input, work with our maps people that are going to help us do the redistricting, and actually provide citizen input before the maps are ever drawn, which is a little bit different than in other instances. You see the political body draw the map and then maybe they get citizen input afterwards. So the idea would be to get citizen input before to actually help shape the maps, and then you get the political input on the back end in making a decision in going forward. So I know that Judy is a champion of redistricting, and thank you, Judy, for all that you do. I'm like right there with you.
Okay, wow, that was a great answer. Sophia Valenzuela, who's on the call, has a question for you. Sophia, if you would like to unmute your mic and ask a question, you can do so.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, hi, my name is Sophia, she, her pronouns. You mentioned that you transitioned from social work to law, right? If I'm not mistaken. Was it difficult to do that transition?
So I was never a social worker. My original goal was to go into social work. So I didn't transition in the sense that I never actually worked as a social worker, but that was my goal. My undergraduate degree is political science, and well, it was government and English. And so I never got to my social work career. So there was not really a real transition.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we have another question that was submitted. Do you have any recommendations for Latinas aspiring to be attorneys?
Absolutely. Do it. We need more women in the field. I think volunteering is really important. I think for a lot of young women, they don't know lawyers, right? So there's a lot of people that, like when I grew up, I know that my parents had a lawyer that did their wills, but we didn't hang around with lawyers. We didn't have a lot of lawyers in our family till my brother went to law school. So you don't really have experience. But I think reaching out, finding a female lawyer that can help mentor you is really important, because it gives you a perspective that I think you otherwise wouldn't get. And they can mentor you on all sorts of things, from picking law schools or looking for job opportunities, looking for volunteer opportunities. So I think that's the mentor. I'm a big proponent of mentoring. I think that mentors can make such a difference. And in the professional capacity, I know there's all sorts of mentors here on this screen, these women who are not showing their faces, that would be ideal mentors. Look, there's Evan. So Evan's a young lawyer. She just showed her face. Evan, she's not that young, but she's one of our younger lawyers. And I think that Evan is somebody that I have noticed that one of our older lawyers is really trying to mentor and teach and sort of train her in an area of law that she was unfamiliar with. I don't know, Evan, you're more their age. I don't know if that was a good answer on.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eva Ugas. My boss is on the call, and you're interviewing her. I think Joanne is very much on point. I can say I've been very blessed to have been able to go into the county attorney's office and work where I do. I work in the general counsel unit. The county attorney's office, like John has mentioned, has a lot of different, covers a lot of different areas in law. And the one that we do is just covers a broad scope of different laws that I wasn't familiar with. I started at the district attorney's office. So from what I do now to what I did before is very different. I wasn't familiar whatsoever with anything that I do now, and the mentorship that my boss, my direct supervisor, has given me has been really tremendous and invaluable to me. I personally have seen, I'm kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, and above me is Patsy Lopez, and above her is Christina Ford. And then there's Eddie Sosa, which is the first assistant. And then there's Joanne. So to me, coming kind of looking at the hierarchy, looking up and seeing so many women within those positions, I feel very honored to be amongst them. They're brilliant minds, and I get to learn from them and just observe, which I do on a daily basis. So I think mentorship is very important. Even if you don't think you don't know anything, any knowledge that you think or could potentially help somebody else. So I think, I just want to reiterate what Joanne said. Mentorship is important, but, have confidence within yourself as well.
Thank you, Eva. You didn't know I was going to call on you, huh?
No, I didn't. I should have known better.
Okay, that was a great answer from both of y'all. Ms. Raneem has a question for you guys. Raneem, if you want to unmute yourself, you can do so now.
Hi, Ms. Bernal. Hey, everyone. Amazing crowd tonight. And Ms. Bernal, you're doing so amazing. So my name is Raneem, and I was one of the co-founders of Ignite back in the day. And I worked in the past in both the state rep's office and city council. And I now transitioned over to the nonprofit life. I work at CASB, so thank you for being a board member. But I did want to ask, so I'm hearing a lot about like mentorship, and I think part of running for office and being elected is only part of it, right? But like, what tips do you have for being like an effective like manager and leader in your office? Because I think sometimes, unfortunately, as you explained, like kind of like in your experiences, like you're always like the odd one out. So sometimes it's really difficult to have someone take a chance on you, right? In terms of like mentorship. And some people just kind of like want to like keep the power to themselves, or unfortunately, like the reality is like just sometimes like women tear other women down, right? I don't want to bring down the joy of this conversation, but like that's also a reality, right? So like, how is it that you cultivate a very positive and engaging environment where obviously one of your staff members feels very comfortable in learning from you? Like, what are your tips in being that person in someone's life?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And hello, I recognize you. The scores are a little, but now I recognize. I think I've met you at the League of Women Voters. Maybe.
Oh yes.
Right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I think that you're right that there's a couple of things. One is that all of us as women need to remember and always remind ourselves that none of our successes are due solely to ourselves, right? I mean, we stand on the shoulders of so many other people that come before us. And I think of like other elected officials, people like Alicia Chacon, who ran for office. Gosh, I think she was the first female county judge, and probably ran before I moved back to El Paso. But these are women that went through a lot and made it easier for us to be where we are. And so keep being mindful. I think that your successes are not just your own is really important. But for me personally, I think I try very hard to measure success in the success of other employees, right? So if I know that other employees, if I can put other employees in a position where they're succeeding, then I'm doing my job, right? My job isn't just to be in front of a camera or to be taking credit for things that the office accomplishes, but to try to find ways to revel in other people's success. And if you measure your own success by how well the people around you are doing, or how well the people that you supervise or that you hire are doing, then it's easier to find that success, right? So people have asked me before, what is the thing that in my career that I am most proud of? And I don't know if I saw her on earlier. So since I've been at the county attorney's office, which is almost 26 years, 5 out of the 6 legal secretaries that I have all gotten their degrees while they worked for me personally. And so pushing people and then seeing their success, that's a measure of my success. And I have one that didn't complete it, and that's my failure. But sometimes I think we need to have a little paradigm shift on what your real measure of success is. When I leave office, I mean, I'm gone. But if you measure your success in people like Evet and others that come after you that are going to be successful, that are going to change the world or make the world a better place, then your success continues. And it isn't about you, it's about measuring their success. And so I would encourage all women to look at that measure of success and figure out like what's really important. And there's such joy in watching other people succeed, in watching other people flourish and go on to things that you might have had a small part in helping them achieve that success.
That's so wonderful.
May I make a comment on that?
Hi, Miss Laura.
Hi. As one of Miss Joanne's staff, and she is very humble. I just want to share with you that Miss Joanne is what one would consider a transformational leader.
Aww.
What that means is for us is that this is a woman who puts other people above herself, who does things at the expense of herself. And I think that's what marks her as the exceptional leader that she is, because as an individual in her office, I have full confidence that I can go into her office and I can talk to her, and her response is going to be that which is going to encourage me and help me grow, because her importance is placed on my growth and my ability to succeed, not on what she does or what she looks like or what people are going to think of her. She puts those interests aside. And I'm not saying that because she's here. I'm saying this because I know that we all want to be strong women, female leaders in anything that we do. And I think in order for us to do that, we need to follow that example. We need to be that transformational leader who says, you know what, I am going to support this person and let that person take all the credit for everything, knowing good and well that maybe I'm responsible for 90% of it, but she'll never take any of it. She'll always give that individual.
Laura, that is so nice of you. I think we should end this conversation now on a positive note. That's really sweet of you to say.
It is the absolute truth.
She's biased, but thank you, Laura. That's real sweet.
Thank you, Ms. Laura. I just want to say that I asked that because, you know, your authenticity really shines through the camera, and I can tell all those things by the way you present yourself. But I'm so happy to hear such amazing reviews from staff. So
that's nice. I didn't make them come, but thank you guys for being here late. They've been working all day long.
Okay, wow. I feel like Raneem knows everyone, but we have a question from Miss Judy Ackerman. She wrote, some really excellent local first-time women candidates did not win yesterday. What suggestions do you have for them?
Yeah, that is such a hard question. I think it's very true that sometimes the good ideas and great leaders don't always make great politicians, because they're not necessarily the same talents, right? You can have great ideas and ideas that are important to the community, but transforming those into and I don't want to sound cynical, but I would say, for example, like all of you, I'm sure, voted yesterday. So there were many people on the ballot that were they were running for Texas Supreme Court, Texas Court of Appeals, all these different statewide races. Well, I will admit that I'm a lawyer who practices in those courts, and I could not have told you much about any of those candidates. It's really difficult to be informed. So what I would suggest for those candidates that didn't win is really not to give up, that they need to continue to push their ideas and their values because they've now, made a name for themselves. I know that there was a candidate that won yesterday a judicial position, and I think it's the 4th or 5th time that she had run. She had run for city council. She had run for a bench before. And last night she was elected one of our new family law judges. And so I think that you can't be discouraged, that you have to keep pushing your ideas and your policy considerations. And I know some of those candidates had really good ideas. Unfortunately, sometimes when people lose, when they run, they disappear. And I hope that those candidates that didn't win yesterday don't disappear, because they've started in this journey of being better known. And I think that that they can be more successful in the future. People don't always win the first time. It's very difficult. Money is very, in my opinion, is just too influential a part of the political process, and that's locally too. If you look at the relative campaign contributions for people that run for office, I mean, it's amazing the amount of money that it takes to be able to get your name out and to publicize yourself. And so I would say don't be discouraged, that it's hard, and that to keep trying. That was a hard question, Judy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah, for leading this session. And we'll go ahead and ask the last question. And unfortunately, we have to wrap up because we only have a few more minutes, and I want to be respectful of y'all's time. But this question comes from someone who is not able to ask it. She's just listening in right now. And I think this is such a great question because I know that there's a lot of us who want to be lawyers on this call. So she says, I took the LSAT last November and I was not satisfied with my score. So I will be retaking it next year. It seems like I have had so many setbacks this year. What advice would you give to somebody in my position in regards to time management and just general advice? I also work a job that the schedule changes every week. And in addition, this is kind of a side note, how do I not compare myself with my other friends? Thank you.
Oh, those were a lot of questions. On time management and on the LSAT. Let me start with the LSAT first. If you want law school to be your priority, then the time management has to, you have to really accept that that's a priority and it's a short-term sacrifice. And I know that it's hard managing, school and work and everything else, but I would say that you just have to make that sacrifice and deciding that maybe it's not going out. Well, nobody's going out now, but it's not that you're giving up and you're making those sacrifices to improve your LSAT score, because that's a short-term sacrifice for a really important long-term gain. So don't give up, just reprioritize. And on time management, sometimes you have to step back and really look at what's important in your life. Since we've been working from home, my office is almost entirely working from home. It's very easy to get sucked into the working 10 or 12 hours a day, because you're always at home and your phone rings constantly. And so you have to make a decision. There's only 24 hours in the day, and you have to make the decision and decide what it is that's important to you, and be willing to sacrifice those things that aren't important. If it's, like our windows really need to be cleaned. I can tell because I'm looking outside right now, but I'm going to prioritize what's important to me, whether it's my work or it's my personal life. Sometimes we go through the motions, and we're in a routine of, if you see dirty dishes in the sink, then you feel like you have to wash them. And I'm not saying that don't wash your dishes, but I am saying that think about where you're really spending your time. And I think surprisingly, when you step back and look where your time is actually spent, that you might discover that the things that you're spending your time on aren't really your priority. And when time is short, don't spend the time on stuff that isn't a priority to you. That would be my answer.
Thank you so much. And with that, we will close the Q&A. Thank you so much, everyone who asked questions, whether it was right now or before. And of course, I just want to, I'm so proud of my members, Josie and Sarah. You guys, thank you so much for stepping up and co-leading this with me. I think just like as we've been talking about this conversation, like I love seeing y'all really step more into who you guys are, and it's really humbling, and it's such an honor for me to to see you guys do this. So thank you both. And of course, thank you, Ms. Bernal, for being with us. I appreciate everybody and y'all's time. Thank you for the participants. We do like to stay on a few minutes after. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.